Welcome to Sons of Patriarchy. I'm your host, Peter Bell. Sons of Patriarchy exists to expose the hidden power structures behind Christian nationalism. Through survivor testimonies, shared storytelling, and honest expert critiques from across the political, theological, and cultural spectrums, we shine light on systems of abuse and authoritarian control principally focused on Doug Wilson of Moscow, Idaho, and the movements he has founded and influenced, as well as across Reformed and conservative churches. Our goal is not just to inform, how did we get here, and what do we do about it, but to spark meaningful conversations in homes, faith communities, and public spaces about what a healthier, freer, and more just society can look like. Together, we can dismantle harmful narratives and build communities of mutual respect and diversity. Sons of Patriarchy aims to do what Doug cannot. We will unite people. We do not demand you be like us. We meet you where you are. And while you may not always agree with us, we hope we can agree on this. Churches should be safe. You can find us on all podcasting platforms as well as YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X, and sonsofpatriarchy.com. Ad-free episodes, bonus content, listening a week ahead of time on both audio and video, monthly Ask Us Anything specials, and many more perks are available across 5 membership levels at patreon.com/sonsofpatriarchy. Much of the same is available via Apple Podcast subscriptions for $4.99 a month. You can give to this work directly at donorbox.com/sons-of-patriarchy. Exclusive Sons of Patriarchy merch is available at sonsofpatriarchy.com/merch. If you'd like to get a hold of us, desire to interview either myself or co-producer Sarah Bader, or you're a news media agency looking for information on Christian nationalism, patriarchy, Doug Wilson, or anything else we covered in this series, go to sonsofpatriarchy.com/contact. Now, on to the episode. Welcome to Can't Trespass the Garden, Abuse in the OPC, Part 4. In this week's episode, you'll hear from an anonymous couple who formerly attended a CREC voiced by Helen Shores Peters, and an anonymous woman who attended Harvest OPC in Michigan. The first is a story of gaslighting by the CREC, the other of marital rape and how Harvest OPC expected the woman's mother to suffer like Christ in her marriage. The first story is shorter, less than 10 minutes long, but I imagine many will relate to it. It was a one-man show, and whatever the pastor said goes. But as the couple dug deeper, they were confronted with the rot. They had to prove themselves to the pastor, and I bet you know how that went. The second, like Stephanie Chernyavsky's a few weeks ago, I have left with very little editing. This, again, is not for the faint of heart. The woman goes into graphic detail about what happened to her mother while she was married to her father, and how the OPC counseled them, suggesting she submit with a sufferer's heart that she might win her husband back. The women were taught to submit, and that their bodies are not their own. The men were taught to lead and conquer those bodies. What you will hear is what happens when that's taught. She also goes into detail on but the OPC has sworn off Doug Wilson. How could he possibly be infecting the denomination? You see, we hear the critiques, and we offer this response from someone who lived it. So, let's begin with how the anonymous couple first heard about Doug Wilson and the CREC, voiced by Helen Shores Peters.
We heard about Doug Wilson in homeschooling around 2004 to 2007 and listened to a couple of his and his wife's talks.
Next, I asked them how they first got involved in the CREC and what they knew of Doug Wilson coming into it.
In early 2020, we began attending a CREC church and became members shortly thereafter. However, at the time of membership, we asked if Doug Wilson was a big part of the CREC denomination, and the pastor said no, not anymore.
They were told Doug Wilson was no longer a big part of the CREC, so they relaxed. But then, after a while, under the teaching of the pastor, they noticed something funny. Here's what they said.
Immediately, we were unsure about paedo communion. The answer we were told is that it used to be the Reformed tradition and that covenant children and babies are to feast on Christ. We also saw some attendees leave without ever getting an explanation of what happened to them. We began questioning the theology, justification, and the imputed righteousness of Christ specifically in September of 2022. When we couldn't get straight answers from the pastor, we began to research what the CREC's theology is. That's when we saw how it is a denomination that is intrinsically entwined with Doug Wilson.
They wanted to give this church a chance. They weren't church shoppers and wanted to find a gospel-proclaiming church with community. So here's how they describe the community itself.
Ours was a church plant from a bigger CREC church. The pastor was the authority over everyone, as we had no elders even up until our time of departure in April 2023. The pastor said that there were no qualified men in the congregation, and there were no deacons either. Men of the church attended monthly head of household meetings. Head of household meetings were made up of only the men of the church. This was supposedly a substitution for not having elected elders, deacons, and a local session in our small church plant. These lasted about 2 hours and were held typically during the week once per month. Most of the meeting was very much like worship and consisted of a homily, singing, and discussion of each family's current situation. Then church business, which consisted of internal business regarding up-and-coming events. We were typically instructed to be the leader in our family and to look for opportunities to lead in the community. Leading in the community could entail attending and being active at city council meetings, finding ways to influence the community in favor of the church, or getting involved with or becoming a liaison with the law enforcement. There was pressure to attend every church event, which was often. Sunday school and worship lasted 3 hours every Sunday morning, and evensong was an hour and a half. Each month was also a fellowship meal, psalm and hymn sing, head of household meeting, men's theology and practice, ladies' Bible study, which was twice monthly. We were a very tight group. We were expected to spend so much time together, it was hard to find time to spend with family. Teaching and preaching focused mainly on the Old Testament, including a study of the 10 Commandments and more than 2 years in Leviticus. One of the main things we noticed was the lack of preaching of Christ and what he accomplished for his people. The lessons were how we were to apply Levitical law to ourselves as people of the covenant. Additionally, the congregation was taught that the commands of God are for all humans on earth, and that the legislation of the law of God brings peace. After the reading of God's word in worship, the congregation was to respond by saying, "Yahweh our God, we will serve, and his voice we will obey."
The longer they stayed, the more they questioned. They started looking into Doug Wilson and realized the church they were at had sold them a bill of goods. They approached the leader, a sole pastor with no elders or deacons, about their concerns. Here's how they were treated.
After researching the CREC and Doug Wilson, we realized we had made a mistake in joining the church. We sent an email to the pastor stating we were leaving due to theological differences. We received a prompt reply that he would not accept our leaving and that we were breaking our membership vows, and we had to argue our case before the session to be able to leave. The tone of the reply was hostile and accusatory. Exchanges went back and forth with us stating our theological concerns and asking to be removed from membership, and were continually denied. We were accused of breaking the 5th and 9th commandments. The pastor said he required of us to be willing to, 1, explicitly state the doctrines and or interpretations of Scripture that the CREC and or our church holds to that are out of conformity with the Bible and our confessional standards, Westminster, Belgic, Heidelberg, and Dort. 2, be willing to discuss such differences. And 3, if your understanding is proving to be unfounded, unwarranted, or incorrect, to submit to the rightly ordained leadership of your church. He stated that it was our responsibility in love to convince your church to 1, conform and or 2, leave the denomination. We were also told that we were in rebellion and needed to repent. There were many statements in our pastor's letters that were demeaning and condescending. Kindness, love, and gentleness were no longer his style. We did not hear from any other members of the church.
They left. So where did they go? And what are the lingering effects of their time in the CREC? This is where they'll conclude.
We are currently regularly attending a truly confessional and reformed church. We are seeing Christ and his gospel anew after falling into such legalism in the CREC. The experience we endured, however, is not without scars and hesitation toward church membership. We still have not officially joined our new church. Anyone considering the CREC or any of Doug Wilson's branches, like Logos School, New St. Andrews, or any of the books by Wilson, should really do their homework and consider what trusted biblical teachers, theologians, and NAPARC say about their beliefs and practices. And be aware that joining is kind of like checking into Hotel California.
Now, for the anonymous woman formerly a member at Harvest OPC near Grand Rapids, Michigan. I will stress once more the need for caution when listening. There are graphic themes throughout the story, and the way it was handled by the pastors and elders at Harvest, paralleling so much of what you heard in the CREC. Please take care of yourself while listening. Here it is in full.
So I first got to the OPC because we were even in a smaller denomination, where some really out-of-pocket stuff happened, and my parents left there because my mom, bless her heart, walked out in the middle of a plagiarized sermon, and they put her under discipline. So my
They
parents
put her
left.
under discipline
They did.
for walking out of a plagiarized sermon and not put the pastor under discipline for plagiarizing a sermon.
Yeah, and they put my dad under discipline for not keeping his wife in line because obviously.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, when I came to the OPC, we had actually been visiting, well, it wasn't called the URC quite yet. We had gone to a CRC first, and they had become independent because that's the time frame of all that happening and the URC starting. And so we were around all of that in the area that I live. And we were visiting URC, and we just felt like it wasn't quite right. And then our family heard about from another family, hey, there's this crazy place that's in half of a gym, and it's this thing that's Presbyterian, which we largely don't have around here. It's mostly Continental Reformed influence.
Mhm. Which means
And
Dutch for those who are listening who know nothing about
yes,
this.
Dutch. Yeah. So,
And a little bit of German, but
yes,
mostly
a little bit
Dutch.
of German. Around here, heavily, heavily Dutch. Um, so when we went to this place, it was tiny, just looked the worst in the ugliest little gym, and there were people in this ugly brown carpeted gym that filled up about half of it. I think there were like 40 people or something.
You're describing every OPC church I've ever been to. This is not
Well, it
narrowing it
doesn't
down.
stay like that. So, I I walked in there and I was a teenager and I was like, are you kidding me? My parents are bringing me to another weird small Reformed church. Like, could we just be normal for a hot second, go somewhere where there's a building and somebody has youth group and it doesn't look like this motley crew of losers, quite honestly. I mean, I was a teenager, so
Yeah.
I was really over it. And we started going there. And the funny thing is that when I first started going there, I hated it. And then I started to feel a little bit relieved because for the first time that I had experienced, because my area is so reformed and so culturally Dutch, there's just a lot of appearances and cultural things that go along with the reformed traditions that are very specific to this area.
Yes.
Everybody looks alike, everybody talks alike, everyone's last name begins with the letter V. And everybody is some percentage Dutch, basically. Not truly, but it feels like that in the
Yeah.
Reformed world.
If you ain't Dutch, you ain't much.
Yes, that's definitely a saying that we grow up with, and that is held to much too strongly by many people here. So when I first came in there, because it was Presbyterian, it was my first like non-Dutch Reformed. experience. And I was like, hey, wait, there are people here who have different last names than I grew up with. There
Yeah.
are people here that are of different socioeconomic
Yeah. And you don't have to ask,
variety.
like, are you my cousin twice removed? Like, do I,
Yes, right.
can I talk to you?
And I started to actually like it because what I come from was so image driven and homogenous that when I first came into the OPC, it was weird, but it was actually a little relief. And so as we started and the church began to grow, there were like a lot of things that were happening that were kind of counter to the culture I was in, and but still had the reform teaching we thought was so important. So it sounds funny to say now, but it was a little breath of fresh air and a little freedom. And then it started to grow. And the more it started to grow, the less it was like that. When I came into the OPC, about a third of the people were homeschooled in that church, and a third went to public school, and a third were in Christian school. And that was totally acceptable. And in fact, they were really proud of that
Hmm.
fact. And they were proud of the fact that you could wear jeans or you could wear whatever to church and it was okay. And they were proud of the fact that you didn't only sing um
Trinity
out of the
Psalter
Purpose
hymnal.
hymnal, which is
Yep.
what the URC does,
Yep.
or I think still does. But
They still do. Yep.
so
It's a
this is my
joint
first
project. Yeah.
experience, yeah, in a Reformed church singing something outside of a hymnal. And I mean, it was Keith Green, so it's still like 20 years old, but it was new to us. And I found out like, okay, this is pretty refreshing. But as it got bigger, as more money came in, as more people became involved, it started to shape back into that more homogenous, more middle class, more strict, and more obsessed with authority and submission structures.
Hmm.
Um, but that was kind of down the road. So that's how I started out. And so I wanted to be there because I thought it was a break, and it didn't really end up to be. So,
Hmm. All right. So as it's growing, so you talked about, and which is interesting because that tracks with other people we've talked to in the CREC,
mhm.
where they came from hyper conservative or hyper rule controlled churches, and they came into this and was like, oh my gosh, I have so much liberty here. And then it ends up, I was like, no, that was a false sense, or just there was small, wait for it to happen, and it will no longer be the case. So as it grows, you talked about authority submission, you talked about the strictness, the
Mhm.
homogeny. What's that culture like growing up in that coming from very strict to, oh, this is a little bit less strict, to like, uh-oh, this is getting stricter than than I'm used to before. And
Yeah.
even some of the stuff in your family too, that was kind of happening all around the same time.
Yeah. So it's a little confusing, right? And when you come from something where some bad stuff has happened and you go to a place where you have some more freedom, you're really happy for that freedom. But as some other things happen, you start to see some flags before other people, maybe because you've already kind of been
Hmm.
there. Or you expect some things and help in ways that were promised that didn't really come through for you. So in my area, like we joked about this earlier, some people like call this area, which is West Michigan, like Jerusalem for Grand Rapids, and Jerusalem because
G.R.
yes,
Ruslam, for those who don't quite catch it,
yes,
G.R. Ruslam, which is
yes,
a joke for anybody who's reformed. Anybody else who's not reformed is like, that's not funny.
yes. It's not, I mean, it's not funny overall, but it does happen.
It's funny for reform because our bar for comedy is very, very low.
Yeah, that's true, especially in West Michigan. It's very stoic and Dutch, like we said. So, West Michigan kind of holds an outside weight for a mid-sized, middle of the country sort of a place because we've had a number of Reformed denominations start in this area and have various headquarters, parachurch organizations, and a large number of publishing companies here. So we have a pretty high view of ourselves. And I can include myself with shame in that often. Um, and we have a pretty outsized view of what we know about Reformed theology and how things should be and what is truly Reformed
Yeah. And how
around
big
here.
and important we really are, because
Correct.
we're really small compared to everything else. And we think we're really big.
Yeah. So, when you're around here, I think one thing that you have to know is that it's so culturally tied, so familially tied, but there's also a certain amount of pride in being really good at what we do here and being like the truly intellectual, reformed Christians who are really salt of the earth people doing the work. So a lot of times when we hear stories like some of the stuff out of the CREC churches or whatever, people around here can kind of be like, well, those are those weirdos out there. Or those are those crazy people on the West Coast because Holly weird, all that stuff, or that's the South. They're really backwards. But here we truly know all the things that people ought to know. So there's a
Yep.
pride. Um, and I don't exclude myself from that. I look back on a lot of things in my life with shame because there is a lack of love in pride. And when you're proud of being a certain thing more than doing a certain thing, more than that being who you truly are in your actions and your heart, you lose sight of the humanity of the people and the truth of the gospel.
Hmm.
So we're really obsessed with the right appearances and knowing the right things. And that's a dangerous place to be.
Yep. I'm not immune to this at all, even though I'm host on this. I host this because I'm not immune to this, not because I am immune to this.
Yeah. So in in my family, I said that when we came into the OPC, we had been dealing with something negative that happened in another church. It was super, super small. And there was no meaningful accountability. So we came into the OPC and we thought, this Presbyterianism. It's really similar to what we grew up with, a Presbyterian form of government in the URC. They still take the Bible really seriously. We're going to switch over from the three forms of unity to the Westminster and start learning that in our catechism now, but it's pretty much the same. And I would say that my mom was actually one who was always a little more excited about reaching out to people from different backgrounds and different life circumstances. And so she was happy that it wasn't as homogenous too. But as uh as we started to be in it more and it started to grow, I mean, churches always have growing pains, right? And so they look for structures or ways to deal with, kind of what they have to deal with. The church is getting bigger, they need more leadership, they're dealing with more people with more needs or problems or all this kind of stuff. So then you go out there looking for more things. And some of that's good, but some of that gets kind of messed up with these authority structures, and people get a little obsessed with who's in charge of what and how that looks. And so when that was happening, some restriction actually started occurring, like even what happened in the church services, and that's continued more and more. But for me, um, when I came into the OPC, I had been in other places before, and there were good people in those other places. But we had been in such a controlled and difficult spot, and then I saw like kind of this opening, and I thought, these are going to be some people who are going to help us. And it seemed like in the beginning that was true. And there were friends there and good people. Um, but I started to see, because I had already seen the breakdown of like church government in relation to my parents, in relation to other places we've been. I'm the oldest of my family. So I started to see some things that made me worried or that I thought were not consistent. Um, and the reason is because my story and the story of my family is a story of an unhealthy environment and domestic abuse. So I thought maybe we were in a place where we could get more support in this, where my parents weren't alone. They weren't so like, they weren't so, I guess, on the margins, and some things like counseling and stuff were a little more encouraged,
Mm-hmm.
and we really needed help. So I thought maybe this will be the place. Um, and it didn't really quite go like that. So this is a hard story to tell because there's no real start or real end. Um, and it's complicated. But my my mom and dad got married because in their background of high control church, there was this fad at the time that if you believed the same things, everybody was supposed to just get married and have kids and raise covenant seed for the Lord. If it sounds like quiverful or whatever, you're right. It's close.
Yep.
It's just a slightly reformed take on that.
Yeah. You wonder where Doug
So,
Wilson gets it? This is where he gets it from.
yeah, Doug Wilson is not the inventor of anything new. He's just chewing up and regurgitating what many, many people have done before him. And the results will be the same as they were before,
Yep.
poor.
Yep. He just makes it look
So,
better than it was. I think
yeah, he's got better
there's
marketing.
yeah, he's got far better marketing.
Yeah, he's got better marketing. Um, so when they got married, my mom would say that they did not love each other. They were not even that good of friends. And my dad basically hounded my mom into marrying him because it was kind of her duty because they both believed in the same things. So she did. And 6 weeks after they got married, surprise, I came along. Like, not like she didn't have me 6 weeks after, but she got pregnant. So she
Yeah.
found out she was
Yeah.
pregnant. Um, and that wasn't a very good start either. So my dad told me, um, from the very beginning, you weren't supposed to be here. I didn't want a kid. I didn't want a daughter, and you're the thing that wrecked our marriage. So that's how I came into this story. Not the best. But I think you can see already that the value of my mom as a woman was not very high. It was, we believe the same things and you need to produce babies for God. And the value of me is not very high either, because I was not a firstborn son and I didn't come when I was supposed to. So that kind of sets the stage for the rest. My parents did not get along overly well. Um, and my dad did not treat my mom well. Um, when I was little, I knew it wasn't happy and it wasn't good, but I didn't really know what was right or wrong or normal. Um, and it was extra confusing because my mom, she was amazing. Just the most lovely person, a literal genius, a phenom at whatever she did. I mean, she was a political activist. She spoke in front of like the House of Representatives. She did all these things. She was well educated. She was articulate. She was amazing. But being in the system she was in just started to shut her down. And I think that that is why what I have to say is important. It's not me, it's not my mom, it's not me telling this story. It's that this story is ubiquitous in this world. And that the misogyny that's present in these teachings takes away the humanity of women, but it also takes away the humanity of the men who do that to women. And that's a tragedy of this too. So I have 8 younger siblings. My parents went through a phase where they thought that birth control was wrong. And then they thought it was maybe okay, used in moderation by some people, but there are still 9 of us. So obviously not that well used. Um, and with my mom, we lived a really different life than my dad. Initially, my mom was a school teacher for the 1 year before I was born, but then because you can't teach after you have a baby because you need to be a stay-at-home mom to be godly, my mom would occasionally substitute teach, and then she had my brother a short time later. So, um, my dad was the breadwinner and he was gone a fair amount. But actually, we were happy when that was the case because living with my mom was great. And we were really poor, but we didn't know it. We lacked a lot of stuff, but we didn't know it because she always made it fun. But when my dad was around, it was always walking on eggshells all the time because he would go into fits of anger and then he would go into silence. He would just completely neglect you and act like you weren't there. And then all of a sudden, sometimes he'd be so sorry and you had to go along with that. And then you would hope he was, and he'd seem nice for a while, and then you just do the whole thing again. I found out much, much later that that's a typical abuse cycle. But of course, I was just a kid, so I didn't know that. So there's this whole tension building section where everything knows that something's going to explode, and then it would explode. Then it'd be silence, and it calmed down, and then you get to a spot where you thought it was normal, and then it would build the tension again and explode again. So what's so important about that for my life is that it never felt safe or secure because you never knew what was going to happen or what was going to set it off. So my mom did the best she could to protect us from that and to shield us when things were set off, but she couldn't do it all the time, obviously. But also she couldn't get us out of that because she didn't have the means. The people around her were teaching the things that we were living. Um, and she told me one time that she told some people early on, but they just basically minimized what was happening and said everybody has struggles in marriage. And and those struggles in marriage are just what God calls you to. And then she was like, no, I think it's a lot worse than that. And then they told her that God just called her to suffer. So she was suffering in Jesus' name, and that's what she was called to. So if you're suffering in Jesus' name, and that's what God called you to, you can't leave that because God called you to it. And the thing about my mom is that she loved God more than anything. And my dad really used that against her. But so did the church. So as I got older, what happens in all abusive situations is that the kids in the family, you get your roles, right? And some people have to appease, some people hide, uh, some people run, some people fight. And I just came out a fighter, I guess. So as things got worse, as I got older, because more things were out of my dad's control, he was angrier more of the time. And he was more aggressive. I would get between my mom and my dad. I would scream at him and he would physically hold on to my forearms. So I had to stay just the distance of my forearms away from his face. And he would scream in my face while my brother would try to calm him down. And my mom would be crying, keeping the other kids okay. Sorry.
Okay.
I just sometimes feel like the feeling of my dad holding onto my arms again. And it's takes me back to that. Um, it sounds like a diversion from this, but I think it's relevant. My husband and I started dating when we were in high school, and I told him a lot of things that were wrong with my family, and he witnessed a lot. But I didn't tell him this until probably like 6 years ago. And he said, "Why did you never tell me this before?" And the only thing that I could figure out is that it was so common, it didn't rise to the level of telling him because it happened all the time. And it just was normal to me. So that's messed up. As I got older, I learned more like about things like CPS because somebody called CPS on our family. And it was because we were homeschooling. Let me tell you, the homeschooling wasn't the problem. Wish that the CPS had done something about that, not the homeschooling. Um, but the homeschooling was a shelter for the problem though too, right? Because there are no backup. There are no backup teachers to tell anybody who's going wrong or like grown-ups outside of the people who are telling you the exact same things that you can go to for help. Or when your body tells you it's wrong, but then the people you talk to tell you it's normal and God called you to it, you live in like this state of confusion. So as I got older, I would still scream at my dad when he would get like that, and we would go at it, and and he would hold onto my arms, or we would hold onto my mom's arms, and I'd pull on him, and I would scream, "I'm gonna call the cops. I'm gonna call CPS." And he would scream at me, holding the phone in my hand, like holding the phone to my hand, saying, "I dare you to call CPS. I dare you to call them. They will take away the kids from your mother and it will kill her. You will kill your mother. Call them and kill your mother." And then, of course, if kids were around, the other kids, they would hear that. So I never called. So that's what I grew up with in my house, and everybody just thought it looked like a lovely homeschooling family on the outside where everybody behaved and sat in the church pews and everybody knew all the catechism questions and everything else. So back to going to church at the OPC, I thought these are the people who maybe are going to help me now. They seem like they're not in this club, and I'm hearing some things and some of this pastor and stuff. Seems like he really cares, like there's a youth group leader. So I didn't say all the things, like I kind of felt it out. But my parents started to go to counseling, and as they did that, I thought, okay, maybe things will get better because the longer section of time that it was normal before the tension and the explosion, it got a little longer. So I thought it was going to get better. And it seemed like the church leaders were helping, and they got this guy in who was like a biblical counselor. And I thought, good, this is gonna be it, finally. But then they got into me. And as you recall, I just told you, I screamed and I fought with my dad all the time. And as I got older, I screamed and I fought with my mom too, because I could not stand for the things that she would stand for, and she would want me to do things that would make it easier for the other people, and I just couldn't do it. I didn't want to. I just couldn't stand by. And she would be like, "You're making it worse." And I would make it worse. I would make it worse. So then I had to go to counseling, right? And I had to talk to the pastor, go to the biblical counselor because I'm disrespectful and ungodly and bitter and unforgiving. And they would make me read books about how not to let the root of bitterness grow in your heart. And I would go to the counseling and I would be like, my dad's doing stuff that's wrong. Why don't you guys stop him from doing stuff that's wrong? And they would say, well, the only thing that we can do is work on your own heart, and you have to stop yourself from being bitter. And then I would fight with them and say, well, stop my dad from hurting my family, and I'll stop being bitter about it. So I was not a very great subject for counseling initially, but eventually I just went along with it because that's all you can do. And every day that you deal with it, the disconnect between what they say that they teach about God being love and everybody made in his own image and all those things, even God as a just God, goes in the face of what you're dealing with at home, but everybody that you go to just tells you it's normal. So I already said that I got married or that I started dating my husband in high school, and one of my big regrets now is that I brought him into the OPC when I did that, because we're the one perfect church, which is another OPC related joke. That's
Yep.
not really funny. Um, I just thought that's where we had to be. And so he came in from being Pentecostal. And
That's a culture shock. Pentecostal to
although, if you met the two of us, everyone would have guessed I was the Pentecostal and he was the Reformed person from our personalities, I think. But yes, it was a culture shock, but he's still Dutch. So since Dutch is still Dutch, he's still fits in somewhat.
yeah.
So um, he came in there and we had counseling for our premarital counseling with the same person who gave me the bitterness counseling and who gave my parents counseling that clearly did not was not effective. Um, and so we grew up in circumstances very much like CREC things that are described: get married young, have kids, do all the things. And the two of us were bound and determined to get married. And we did get married young, but also we were not really into that whole get married young, whatever, but we did. And my husband is not at all like my dad. And the blessing of my life is that he saved me from that, not just from being in my house, but when I saw the way that he lived with other people and the way that he treated me, I saw God a different way. Because when you talk about God in the Bible being a father and loving and all this stuff, it just really didn't ring true. And then when I saw him do it, it changed something in me and started to heal some of those things. But there was in that so much shame and self-loathing that I have, so much hating being who God made me to be as a woman because it was so hated in my home. But there's been a lot to unpack for a lot of years, and he's walked with me all that way. So when my husband and I got married, of course, we had heard all the things. Don't have sex before you're married. Don't do all these things. You're, a squeezed out tube of toothpaste or a battered rose with no value if you've had sex, etc. So we got married, and then, of course, in the culture, you just have to switch it on to being the opposite. Total pure virginity or sex goddess, immediately one or the other. So that was a transition I did not navigate overly well. And I had a lot of trouble with. But my husband and I really loved each other, and this sounds like extra info, but we had sex quite a bit right when we got married, and I had some issues. And because our background was not overly good about talking about those issues, I didn't know what to do, and I needed help. So I went to my mom. I'm going to say this is going to get pretty graphic. So, um, yeah. Um, I went to my mom, and I was having a lot of infections and issues with that. And when I went to her, I asked for help, and she was good about that. And once we kind of crossed that boundary, she was good about talking with me about it and helping me to the doctor, advocate for myself. I had a good doctor, whatever, but it still kept happening. And so she took me aside, and she said to me, "Is your husband forcing himself on you?" And I was furious. Because, like I said, my husband's a great guy, and I never want anybody to say that about him, right? And I was just like, why? Why would you ever say that? It's terrible. And my mama said, well, if somebody's forcing themselves on you a lot, maybe it can lead to some of these problems that you're having. I want to make sure, you're okay. And the more she said it, it's my mom, so I'm embarrassed, right? But the more she said it, the more angry I got because I knew she was going to keep talking, and I didn't want to hear what she had to say. And my mom told me that the reason that she asked is because she had a lot of problems also, and it was because my dad had forced himself on her a lot, and her body wasn't ready for it, and it led to problems. And she never used the word rape, but what she described to me was rape. But the way she talked about it was so careful because we were always taught all along that your body belongs to your husband. So really, there's no such thing as marital rape. But she was worried about me, and she did not want my life to be what hers was. So she wanted to know if I was okay. And one of the greatest shames of my life is that instead of loving her, I got angry at her. I couldn't deal with what she was telling me, and I didn't want to hear it because it has too many implications for my family and my life. And also, I knew that's what she was gonna say because I felt that had been happening from other things she had said. And I just wanted to pretend that it was not real so I could go on living my life like I had been. So I didn't even tell my husband because I didn't want him to know that she thought maybe he was raping me. I I left her alone in that. When I was in my 20s, my mom was diagnosed with cancer after having tons of chronic health problems related to stress for obvious reasons. She had 9 kids and an abusive husband, and a church that was telling her it was just God's calling to suffer. Later, as I unpacked some of this myself, years later, I admitted to my husband and I talked to my mom's sister. And my mom's sister was beside herself because my mom had disclosed that to her too. But she didn't know what to do. And she was in like a small group in counseling at Harvest, and my aunt was there too. And she thought that they were helping them. So she didn't know what else to do. So she thought that would maybe make it stop. But then my mom told my aunt that even when she was in treatment for colorectal cancer, and to be very crude, bleeding out of places you shouldn't be, that was still demanded of her because she owed her body to my dad. So when I see somebody like Doug Wilson or others write things about how a man conquers and uh, basically subjugates a woman, I see what he's saying. That's not sex, that's rape. And what he's doing when he teaches those sorts of things, and the people who don't call him out on it, are letting my mom and people like her live in the space that she lived in, where her body is nothing and her pain does not matter because she's a lesser individual as a woman. And it gives the right to my dad and to other men to do the same thing to other women. It's not a victimless crime or just a bunch of words. It has real life implications.
Speaking of Doug Wilson and the OPC, and I want to hit this one pretty hard, just because we get comments. I'm sure you see the comments we get that, hey, The OPC isn't that bad. It's just a few churches here and there.
Mhm.
I was part of it. You were part of it. Yes,
Mhm.
sure, there are good churches there. There are good ministers there. We've both had good ministers in the OPC, but they've left the OPC by and large.
That's true.
So they have been in there.
Yeah,
And I think you've heard the same thing that I have, that the OPC has made a big deal, and NAPARC, North American Presbyterian Reformed Council, has made a big deal that federal vision has no place in their churches.
sure,
Doug Wilson has no place in their churches. Patriarchy has no place in their churches. That this theology of authority and submission supposedly has no place in their churches. But you saw his influence all throughout in
yep,
an OPC church, in a very large OPC church, and still a very large OPC church.
yeah.
Um, can you talk to those? This is not an original question, but just because it's OPC, the OPC people were like, those are the bad churches. That's all throughout. We our pastor has spoken against Doug Wilson. It is not in our church. The denomination has spoken against Doug Wilson. It's not in the denomination. It's just these bad apples. What would you say to that?
I've heard the bad apples argument so many times that I am astounded by the fact that everybody forgets the second half of that proverb, which is they spoil the whole bunch. So bad apples are not just bad apples. Their rot infiltrates everything that they're around. And the good apples aren't stopping the bad apples from being bad by just being there. They're getting slowly rotted as well. And in fact, when somebody looks at a church and says, look, here are these handful of good people, or this is one good pastor, the people that stay in the mess because of the good people, not because of the bad ones, right? So to some degree, the bad people, they just do their bad things. But the good people who don't call out the bad people or are so worried about the institution of the church or the reputation of the pastor or not making false accusations or following Matthew 18 and not gossiping are actually the people that are trapping the people in unsafe situations with the abusive people. So everybody likes to say it's not us or we would never. But my mom, she's she's smarter than anybody I've ever met. I've met a lot of smart people, and she loved God more than anybody I've ever met. And I've met a lot of people who love God. And all her goodness and wisdom and biblical knowledge and everything else did not save her from this because the rot was there. And when she came to people, nobody helped her. They looked the other way, and I am in that too. I did the same. I have done the same to others to my shame. I have been the good person who's kept hurting people in bad places where they were unsafe. You can't just say there are good people or good institutions, um, and then ignore all the bad that's happening. It's ridiculous. Also, like I said, in West Michigan, we're proud about what we know about God and what our orthodox standards are. And we can say we don't believe in federal vision or that Doug Wilson guy out west. He's not truly reformed. I mean, you know, he's pretty sketchy, but he's got some good points too. So, he's not all bad, but he's just kind of a weirdo out there on the fringe. And we kind of know too much and we're too good for that sort of thing. But the truth is that it's everywhere. What I can speak to is my own life, and that I grew up in homeschooling, and the homeschooling influence of Doug Wilson is pervasive. Um, I'm an early generation homeschooler in my state. It was not actually legal when my parents started homeschooling. We knew the people who were the court case to make it legal. So we did this whole Doug Wilson, Doug Phillips, Gothard, all this stuff before most everybody that we know. I knew people that I grew up with who went to Moscow, Idaho before anybody knew a single thing about Moscow, Idaho out of these weird little homeschooling groups. And I've seen this happen already. So what I'm watching is just a train wreck of people being worried again about the cultural, letting the pendulum swing so far the other direction that they'll take anything that's fighting against what they perceive is bad. Um, and so right now, you can look at some movements that are really popular in homeschooling. Um, and you can see that even outside of homeschooling, Doug Wilson has like an outside influence on him. For example, one of the most popular things around here is called classical conversations. Super popular. There are a lot of good elements of the schooling, right? A lot of things that people really appreciate about being with their kids, about homeschooling, being in these groups with support and teaching and everything. But he has a huge influence on those
Hmm.
things. Huge. If you're anywhere in homeschooling, Doug Wilson has some of his stuff there, and he has since before you ever started homeschooling. You don't even know he's there. He's so ubiquitous. And you see it too in other things that are embraced. Like if you look at what's happening in studies in the churches or in women's Bible studies or what resources that are being shared, you'll see not Doug Wilson, but you'll see Merkel and Jankovic all over the place. And they're busy telling women, you're too big, get smaller, except for me, because I get to be in charge of things and tell you how you shouldn't be in charge of things. They're everywhere. They're so when you go into classes or whatever, they think, "Oh, this doesn't impact me." Like I don't think anything that that crazy guy over there thinks, but it's in the water that you swim in and the air that you breathe. It's all around you. And it's in the culture war stuff. It's in the marriage and family stuff. It's in the biblical manhood, womanhood stuff. It's in the parenting stuff. It's everywhere. I got books from them about bitterness, instead of dealing with the abuse. We got marriage books from Doug Wilson from our church. Like, I think it's called Reforming Marriage. I could
Hmm.
be wrong on that. But so we got that one. Tons of people through different groups we've been in have given us those kind of books in Bible studies, small groups, counseling situations. It's all there. Um, and even where Doug Wilson himself isn't, the same teachings are pervasive about men and women. So one thing that was hugely popular um, in our church was a book by somebody called Wayne Grudem.
Hmm.
And in there, I mean, that's what they ran the catechism classes on Wednesday nights on. And in there, um, women were eternally subordinate to men because the son is eternally subordinate to the father, which is a heresy,
Yep.
actually.
Heresy is
Except,
1700 years old. It's not new.
yeah, it's not a new one. And that was the Wednesday night study.
Hmm.
And the
So
through line
OPC church
there,
was going through a Wednesday night
yeah,
study of
for all the
eternal
youth group,
subordination.
for all the youth group, the
That's
Wayne
good.
Grudem systematic
That's good
theology.
to know. Yeah.
Yeah. So a whole new generation raised on this thing. And what's interesting is, would the OPC say that eternal subordination of the Son is good to teach? No, they
No.
would not. But
No.
guess what? They're fine with it as long as Everybody stays in their authority structures on account of it, especially women. And you know what else they're fine with that they think is outrageous? Wayne Grudem doesn't think that the speaking in tongues and other gifts of the Spirit in that way have stopped. Totally bad. But as long as he's saying that women have to stay in their places, he's still in. Absolutely still in. And he can also tell all sorts of people in our, background how far Amy Bird or anybody else who was OPC is outside of orthodoxy, even though he's technically outside of what we teach as orthodoxy in the OPC.
Not technically, he is very outside of
Yes,
orthodoxy of
correct.
OPC. And Amy Bird, if anything, is far more into Orthodox Christian belief than anything that Wayne Grudem would say.
Correct. But again, that's
But she's a
why,
woman, so she can't say
yes,
anything.
yes, obviously, obviously. But again, that's why we like to say we believe these really orthodox, wonderful things, but our practice is authority and control structures and fits very perfectly with what Doug Wilson has to say about men's and women's roles and what people like Wayne Grudem and others have to say about, um, you know, even heresies to hold those sorts of ideas up. We're fine with it. Also, it's funny, like one of the things that they give out, and they paid for us to even go to a conference of, was a local person who wrote a really famous book, Love and Respect, with his
Hmm.
wife. Um,
Hmm.
and again, not reformed,
No.
was at a Pentecostal church that we would not consider acceptable in any way in our circles. I don't agree with that, but I mean,
Hmm.
technically speaking, from that position. But it was okay to send us to conferences to hear this person, even though he has in one of his books very famously about how a woman, if she shows enough unconditional respect, can get a husband who hits her to stop hitting her. That's fine. That's fine in our churches. We can send our struggling, abusive marriages to that conference, even though it's not reformed, because what we really believe in is those authority and submission structures. That's the practical truth of the belief.
Yep. Yeah. So, um, going back to um, your family and with the OPC that you guys are at, so amongst other families, you've seen this play out in your family. You don't have to go into the stories with other families. You saw it happen in other
Tons.
families. Um, how did, again, OPC pastors, whom we have been told multiple times, even as Sons of Patriarchy, that this is not a thing in the OPC, so why are you guys going after us so hard?
Yeah.
How did the pastors deal with this? What did this look like? Did they tell your mom, "Hey, I'm sorry. Here's the resources. We'll help you out. Your husband's in the wrong. He's an abuser, and he needs to go to jail, or he needs it's intensive counseling, or or do they blame this on your mom? What did that look like from your pastors?
Well, they talked to my mom, and my mom always had to be more respectful and more submissive. And also, like I said to you, my mom's brilliant and funny. People were drawn to her. They loved her. She was a great teacher. She was involved with a lot of people. And they want her to keep doing those things, but also make herself smaller when she did it, right? And they would talk about how my mom, because she's such a phenomenal person, was just really hard for my dad to live with.
Hmm.
And so, in order to make my dad's life more comfortable, she had to be smaller, more submissive, more respectful, less vocal, um, because that was making him act out, basically. So, my mom was too smart, too strong, and too articulate. Um, and she had to be less so that she would get abused less. Um, And I just, I can't even explain how that's the opposite of what's true. And my mom was gifted all those things by God, and she was an amazing person. And we're supposed to believe that everybody's created in God's image and He's given them good gifts to do good work in this world. My mom was trying to do that, even in her circumstance. And they were like, could you do some less of that? Be less of who God made you to be so that you can live a more peaceful life. And they did say some things to me, to my dad, like be more loving or whatever. Um, and they gave him a book about how to help my mom have an orgasm, but they didn't give him help to actually be a good person. And my dad is responsible for his actions, 100%. But the church did not love my dad well either. Loving my dad would have been stopping him from doing things that's hurting others and hurting himself. But they didn't because they cared about the appearance of it. And it's too hard to actually face those things and give the help that's needed. It's better to just put a few band-aids on a gaping wound and walk away saying, look, sufficiency of scripture took care of it. No counseling, no divorce needed because God really hates divorce. So the message we got was that God really hates divorce, but He's perfectly fine with you being abused in this marriage. That's it. That's all of it, except they'd say it much nicer and over a much longer period of time. And what's more is that I've seen it repeat in my own family and in families around me. Basically, when you're in a situation like this, you have the option to either join the team and act like the others act, or fight against it and realize that your life's just going to be hard for a really long time. And so in my family, some of us have tried to fight against it and some of us have given in. And I will tell you that the church did not love any of us well in that. There were so many times that they could have helped us that they didn't. So many times. And if you're in a system that is broken, that perpetuates these things, the thought of getting out of them is nearly impossible.
So, based off of your experiences in speaking out in various formal, informal ways, you've spoken in churches, you've spoken in other formal ways that I won't get too specific in. Um, you've become a woman who's entrusted with a lot of stories in the
Yes.
OPC. Um,
Mhm.
and like we said before even recording, our assumption is some of them are going to listen, but they're not sure how they're going to talk or if they
Mhm.
can talk. So if you can
Yeah.
talk to them, even
Yeah.
if they can't talk, and we're hoping we can provide some sort of strength for them to talk and get them the help that they need. We actually legitimately do have the help that they can use. Um, what would you tell those who are listening, who are in OPC churches, who are consistently told, like we're told, and like you've been told, that it's not that bad here. It's only a few bad apples. You're just not used to a strong church or strong discipline or strong reform doctrine. Um, and other people have it a lot worse. This is a lot better. What would you tell those women and men who you've talked to, but they don't know what they can do?
As if, okay, I've thought about this a lot, and it's a really hard question to answer because there are so many facets of it. But I think I would like to read a Bible passage that I've been thinking about a lot today before I did this,
Hmm.
because I want this to be kind of the starting place
Yep.
for where we think.
Please do.
Um, I want to read from Isaiah 61.
Yep. That's a good one.
The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and freedom to the prisoners, to proclaim the year of our Lord's favor and the day of God's vengeance, to comfort all who mourn, to provide for all who mourn in Zion, to give them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, festive oil instead of mourning, and splendid clothes instead of despair. And they will be called righteous trees, planted by the Lord to glorify him. In the place of your shame, you will have a double portion. In the place of your disgrace, they will rejoice over their share. So they will possess double in their land, and eternal joy will be theirs. For I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery and injustice, and I will faithfully reward my people. I'll make a permanent covenant with them. I rejoice in the Lord. I exalted my God, for he has clothed me with the garments of salvation and wrapped me in a robe of righteousness. As a groom wears a turban, as a bride adorns herself with jewels. For as the earth produces its growth, and as the garden enables what is sown to spring up, so the Lord God will cause righteousness and praise to spring forth before all the nations. The reason that I read that is because when you see what God offers you in His Word, the freedom, the rejoicing, the comfort in the morning, the glory instead of the shame, the beauty instead of the ashes. That's not the picture that we're getting in these churches. That's not it. When you come to them with your mourning, are you met with that beauty that we read about? When you come to them with your shame, do they offer you that grace, that beauty? Do they lift you up? Do they free you from things that God didn't call you to be caged by? Does it call you to despair? What we actually have offered from Jesus is something so much more beautiful than we're being offered here. And I don't mean like somewhere down the road in heaven. Yeah, somewhere down the road in heaven too. But God calls us to that here. Do these ministers of God, do they bring to you what they're supposed to bring to you? Do they bring you that love? Do they meet your tears with tears of their own? Or do they just tell you that your tears are unrighteous feelings, um, that's out of control bitterness, or that if you really loved God, you would subject yourself to these things? Do they bring up all the things that you've done wrong in your past? Or do they tell you why you deserve what you're in because of your past? Or do they tell you the gospel? Is that Jesus already healed you from the past shame with his own righteousness? Because what God calls us into is not the cage and the burden that we're given in these sorts of teachings from Doug Wilson or Wayne Grudem or Bill Gothard or whoever else you want to put on the list, Doug Phillips, etc. Um, it's a really ugly, shabby promise of a prosperity gospel for reformed people, right? If you live the right way, if you do the right things, you're going to have these right outcomes. But that's not actually what God promises us, right? So, do the things that you're being told by the people around you actually match up with the heart that Jesus has for you? Because I don't think it does. And you don't have to stay there. God does not want you to stay in an abusive marriage because you've been called to suffering. The person who's abusing you, man or woman, because both do it, even though it's more acceptable for men in these backgrounds, the person who's abusing you is breaking the covenant vows of marriage. That's it. You bringing that up or anything else is not breaking any vows. It's not gossiping. It's not bringing your spouse down. It's not bitterness. It's accountability. And if the people around you um, blame you for what's happening to you, they're wrong. They're absolutely wrong. I know it's so hard to hear because probably for so long they've just been listing all the things that are wrong with you. And if you know the truth about yourself, you can look at yourself and you can see plenty of things wrong with you. And so then you think, oh no, maybe it is me. Maybe I'm really wicked. Or maybe sometimes your buttons get pushed and you act out in a way that you're ashamed of. And that comes up again. And you think, well, maybe I do deserve this. But you don't. Abusive actions of someone else on you are dependent on their choice to abuse you. It has nothing to do with what you deserve coming from them. And for those who say that they believe in God and that they love Him and that they're living with the fruit of the gospel of grace, and what they give you is pain and judgment, they're not telling the truth. Sometimes you have to learn to trust your body when all the things of your mind and all the things that they're teaching you are wrong. Because I think there has been part of me that has always known. I felt it in my body, but everybody told me, you can't trust your feelings, you can't trust your body. But God gave us our feelings and God gave us our bodies. And those are warning signs for what's happening with us. And if you know something is wrong, or if you're worried something is wrong, go find help from somebody outside of your circles. There are so many places that you can do that, and you can do it confidentially. And you can even call them anonymously and say, hey, can you tell me if this is bad? Can you tell me if this is abuse? There are ways that you can contact people that can't be traced if you need that. There are people all around who can help you, but there are a lot of people in your circles who will not because their lifestyle depends on the system that you're in staying the same way it is right now. And if you call them to do something about what's happening in your system, it's going to disrupt it. So find somebody else. The way that I got help is that I met some people in my church who were from outside of the OPC. And they told me that things were wrong that I knew were wrong for a long time. And in fact, they brought Rachel Den Hollander to speak at my church. And I was so relieved because some things I never had language for, never could put together, she had the words for. And it felt like it just freed me. And there is actually freedom out there. It's not easy. It's not beautiful a lot of times. The process of getting there is bumpy, but the burden being removed and the door of the cage being opened is worth it. It's so worth it. And there are people who help you. They're everywhere. And they have stories like yours too. So they'll believe you. One thing that I was always taught that I had a hard time believing, because when I started out, my mom wanted me to be here, but my dad didn't. So I really wasn't sure whether it was worth a whole lot. But God really did make you in his own image, and he did not make a mistake. And what he made you to be and what gifts he gave you are not wrong just because some weird system tells you that's not womanhood, or that's not good marriage, or that's whatever. He made you the way you are, and he loves you. And if people are undermining that, they're wrong. God's on your side because he made you like that. It's okay. It's really okay.
I cannot think of a better way to end this episode than with the words of this woman on Isaiah 61. And also know you're not alone. Know you are made in the beautiful image of God. Know the Lord fights for your justice. Know this. I want to thank both the anonymous couple from the CREC, Helen Shores Peters, for narrating their answers, and the anonymous woman formerly in the OPC for their vulnerability and courage in sharing their stories. Everyone comes on this series at a significant expense of their personal lives. The reason so many go anonymous is for their safety, whether it's because they have family who attends the churches they have left, or they have been previously targeted. Don't think they go on anonymously for fear. It's the most courageous thing they could do, because they know the consequences of speaking out, even anonymously. They know they could still be found out. No one who's spoken on this series is excited or thrilled to talk about what happened to them. No one relishes in bringing someone down. They come on as a last resort. The church courts have failed them. Their pastors have blamed them. The congregations have disowned them. They have nowhere else to turn. We are their voice, and we will never stop. May the Lord work through and in the stories that have been told on here, and may those who have been trespassed find justice in this world or the next. Next week, we continue with our series of abuse in the OPC with yet another CREC story added in. See you then.